I made a book. I want to tell you in this video all about it, but first, time to make a cup of tea. So before I start telling you about my book, I wanted to show you some books that I've collected of a similar theme to the one that I've created. I'll be showing you 4 books and 1 zine in this, and then talking about my book. Shaky, shaky. Right then, let's go grab those books off the shelf. So, the first book that I wanted to show you is this one. Snowfall over Basel by Bastian Pieter, who I've gotten to know through working on my book. All in a Day's Work by David Collier. Through the Looking Glass by Carol Evans. Still Life, which is a collection. And then finally the zine, we've got Monochrome, which is by Analog Cafe. Snowfall over Basel. This one I wanted to start with because it doesn't scream pandemic. It doesn't even mention it in the blurb on the back that this was shot during the pandemic, but it does mention a very specific day, so January 2021, which, as we know, was during this crazy year. And it's all about how the streets were really quiet, and so many of the images in this are with one solitary figure, or there's a glimpse of a mask. They're so cinematic. They really tell a story. They are just spectacular. I mean, I have to say, Bastian is one of my favourite photographers now. Ever since coming across his work through working on my book, I recommend his work to anyone who's interested in street photography because his photographs are just beautiful. You can actually buy Bastian's book through Blurb. I'll include a link in the description. But even if you don't ultimately buy the book, go and check out his Instagram feed because his work is amazing. I'm so hot. All in a Day's Work by David Collier. Of all the books in this collection, I think this is the one that you're most likely to have heard of if you've heard of any of them, and that is because David has been interviewed for basically every publication and podcast you could think of, from The Guardian to the Royal Photographic Society, because this is a body of work that he created whilst working in the NHS on the front lines of all of the pandemic. These were all taken inside the hospital and really just capture what it was like on those front lines. I wanted to share a quote from this book. It would be easy to look at these photos and perhaps see people making light of a tragedy unfolding. In some ways that's possibly true. We smile and we crack jokes. There's a gallows humour in healthcare. It's a survival technique. It's not long, however, before the cracks show. People cry, people snap at each other. A young nurse qualified this year climbs into a cardboard box at the end of a shift, absolutely shattered because she can't face getting showered and changed before driving home. She'll be back in the morning to face it again. And I think when I first flicked through the book, when it first arrived, I saw all these smiling faces in the photos, and I thought, well, this is not what I was expecting. Going back through it more carefully, reading what the introduction that he wrote at the beginning, you can really start to see the tension, the stress, and you start to realise how much of this is a coping mechanism. I really encourage you, if you can, to get your hands on this book. Next we have Through the Looking Glass by Carol Evans. She is documenting the way one street came together during the first lockdown to help each other, to provide comfort. So this is her photographic portrait series where she took photographs through the windows of her neighbours' houses of them, and it's just really beautiful. Here's a quote I want to share from Carol's introduction. While walking down the street, I happened to see a neighbour in her front window. I stopped to chat and say hello. While we talked, I watched the reflections of the street in her face. It was a beautiful metaphor for how we were all feeling, isolated, trapped in 4 walls, the outside world a mere reflection. The glass provided a barrier between us, and yet at the same time allowed us to communicate safely. At the time of recording, I believe there are still copies of this available on Carol's website, so please do go and check that out. I've included a link in the description so you can go straight to the shop if you would like to purchase a copy. Okay, we come to Still Life, and this one I think is the closest to what I have created of all the books and zines that I'm showing you here. So this one is created by the magazine Still Life. I purchased this through Pix and Ink, although I believe you can also purchase it from Still Life. I keep making noises with the books. So as a separate project to their magazine, they've created this book from their contributors, which is a collection of photographs, both digital and analogue, poems, essays, anything really creative from their regular contributors to the magazine. Some of these are so beautiful. Every time I look at it, I see something different. So the big difference between this book and the one that I've created is that there isn't very much text accompanying the images for this. You're really left up to create your own stories around the images, to feel whatever I suppose you feel based on your experience of lockdown when looking at the images. My personal opinion is these books, all of them, are going to become really important historical documents. One day in the future, these will be what are looked at in schools to refer to this time, this weird, bizarre time that we're living through. And so we come to the only zine that I've included in this collection, and that is Monochrome from Analog Cafe. And I loved this so much that I've even quoted Dimitri in my introduction to the book that I've created, and I'll share that little quote here with you now because I just loved it so much. Surrounded by the beep, I take photos in an attempt to observe and understand. I take photos to feel like my perspective is somehow valuable. I take photos hoping that someday I can look back at them, having made it through safe, happy and free. This particular zine was a call out to his contributors to ask for basically photographic diaries of their time in lockdown. And so it's a really rough and ready depiction of daily life through lockdown. I mean, here, look, we've even got images of them sat at their computers. You know, it is really just capturing the day-to-day life. It's very different to the other ones that I've shown, in that this is the lived experience of those of us stuck in our houses rather than on the front lines, rather than going and taking photographs of our neighbours. This is us stuck indoors, not sure what to do from day to day. Again, this one I believe is still available from the Analog Cafe website. All sale proceeds from this go to the UK Black Women Documentary Photographers Fund, which is fantastic, so go and support that. Which leads me to Photography Through the Pandemic, the book that I have created alongside 35mmC. So when I first thought up the idea, it was supposed to be a little zine, a bit like the Analog Cafe monochrome one, but I was absolutely blown away with the response when I started reaching out to people to see who'd be interested in being part of the project. There was so much support and so much enthusiasm. What we've ended up with is 49 contributors from around the world, from all sorts of different lived experiences. We've got professional photographers, amateur photographers, we've got people who have struggled just to get through the day, people whose creativity was completely deadened, people who had ideas sparked and projects formed in their minds. It's just been fantastic to work through all of the submissions. And there's this lovely balance of the more serious portraits of frontline workers taken on tintypes or wet plate collodion, and then equally one of my favourite contributors submitted a series of images of his dog. Generally the images were taken whilst he was out on a dog walk, which is just so relatable for me because that's been my lived experience, going out on a daily dog walk. When talking to potential contributors, the only guidance I gave them was that I wanted them to share their experience of lockdown. It didn't matter what that was, whether they wanted to talk about a specific project they were working on, whether they wanted to talk about what daily life was like, interruptions to their business. And this is where the book goes above and beyond for me. It's not just about the quality of the images, it's about the variety of stories and the perspectives covered. What's more, this is unique. We have captured, a bit like a photograph, a moment in time. How different would this book be if I had reached out to these contributors in 10 years' time, looking back at their experience of the pandemic? how different would it have been if I had contacted them 2 months into lockdown? So in the description you'll find a link to 35mmc and the specific article where you can sign up to find out when the Kickstarter goes live. Please do put your email in there to receive the email to be notified when the Kickstarter goes up, because that's how we'll gauge when we're ready to launch the Kickstarter, when we feel like there's enough interest. And finally, for our funny film photograph this week, we have a submission from Joris. He has submitted an image taken on a half-frame camera, which is perfect because he is featured in the book and his submissions are all taken on a half-frame camera, so it's quite a nice bit of continuity there. If you want to submit your photo, check the description for all the information on how to do that.